Hello and welcome back. Today we look at Ashworth Hospital and its most notorious patients. But first, let's start with a little bit of history. Ashworth Hospital is a high security psychiatric hospital around 9 to 10 miles northeast of Liverpool. Ashworth is one of the 3 high security psychiatric hospitals in England and Wales. We have already looked at Rampton and Broadmoor. By definition, these hospitals exist to work with people who require treatment due to their dangerous, violent or criminal behaviour. In 1974, overcrowding at Broadmoor led to the construction of Park Lane Special Hospital. In 1989, Moss Side and Park Lane hospitals merged to form Ashworth Hospital. In 1988, a documentary was broadcasted on British television. It alleged that patient Sean Walton had passed away after being attacked by staff members. It also lodged a series of other allegations. In 1993, because of this documentary, a patient's advocacy service was set up in Ashworth Hospital. This was the first mental health advocacy service to be introduced in high security hospitals in the UK. The allegations towards Ashworth Hospital continued, and in 1997 a patient ran away from a day rehabilitation trip in protest against his treatment and the management of the personality disorder unit. He made multiple allegations, including that substances were freely available, that patients were running businesses, and that a child had been put at risk at the hands of a number of people on the register, that security had been compromised, and that a number of staff members were corrupt. In 1999, an inquiry was created. This inquiry found that a child had indeed visited the hospital on hundreds of occasions and had spent periods with a patient with a history of assault against young girls. The patient had also visited the child at her home whilst escorted by a nurse. The nurse had taken pictures of the child for the patient, one of her on her bed and another one of her on a loo. The child's father also took a young son of a friend to visit a second patient, found guilty of kidnapping, SA and taking the life of a 13-year-old boy. As a result of this inquiry, a review into the security was undertaken. It was recommended in May 2000 that security be upgraded to that of a Category B prison. There has been various other inquiries, but there have been many on illegal substance use and the treatment by staff on various occasions. The CQC inspection of 2013 found that the service was good for all domains. The services provided were caring, responsive and well led. This was their latest review. Today it is home to around 228 patients who live in 14 single-storey semi-detached wards. Each ward concentrates on a particular type of care where patients with similar conditions live together. But let's get into the patients. And first we look at patient Sandra Riley, who took the lives of all her children. Sandra Riley had a troubled early life herself. She was abandoned by her parents at 2 months old and was known to go through the social service system. In 1973, she gave birth to a girl who she decided to give up for adoption. The next year, she gave birth again, this time to a boy. He passed away shortly after he was born, and this was recorded as cot death. In December 1976, she gave birth to another boy called Andrew with her recent husband Stanley. A few days later, they rushed him to hospital and he was found to have a fracture. Authorities thought it was accidental, but to be sure, he was placed on the at-risk register to keep an eye on things for a little while. 3 years later, Andrew was taken off the risk register, and a few months later, in January 1981, she gave birth again to another son called Christopher. Christopher was just a month old when Sandra Riley took his life, but this time she admitted it. and while she was being questioned, she also admitted to taking her first son's life, Anthony Riley. She was charged with 2 counts of infanticide, but experts concluded that she was not at risk to her other son Andrew or any other children, so she was given a 2-year probation order. Her husband allowed her to move back in with them, as it was claimed that there was no psychiatric indications that she would harm Andrew. Her husband said that this decision haunts him. In April 1985, while still on probation, Sandra Riley was left alone to care for Andrew. She took his life. She was committed to Moss Side Mental Hospital indefinitely. This then later merged into Ashworth Hospital. As you probably noticed, unlike other cases, there's not a lot of photos I can put along with the audio. There's a few newspaper clippings, but even information is quite hard to come by. I actually submitted a Freedom of Information request to the National Archives, but I haven't got a response. Her case is currently closed and its opening date is on the 1st of January 2053. But let's get on to our second patient. Robert Sartin was a 22-year-old clerk. His crimes took place in Mount Seaton in Tyne and Wear on the 30th of April 1989. He took his father's shotgun and climbed into a car outside his parents' home at around 11:40 a.m. Witnesses described how he fired randomly at people. Judith Rose was driving along nearby. As she drove along, she noticed a figure dressed in black. She then noticed the gun. The man was pointing it at her. The first shot shattered the windscreen, while the second shot struck her hand. The man then walked calmly down the road. Lorraine Noble, who was 39, was chatting to Frank Roberts when they both spotted the gun. Lorraine ran to her house but was shot and badly injured. Frank threw himself to the ground. Joan Kernigan and her husband James and a neighbour, William Dack, were all shot as they stood chatting in the street. Kenneth McIntosh was then shot and had his life taken. Once up close, the gunman shot him twice in the back. Robert Wilson was 38 years old and was looking for his girlfriend. Sartin shot him. Robert was peppered with around 60 pellets. The next victim was Kathleen Lynch, who was looking out through her window. Sartin fired, injuring her shoulder. On Eastleigh Avenue, Sartin then shot Brian Thomas, who was 39 years old. Vera Burrows, who was 75, spoke with him at her door on Eastfield Avenue and asked him what he was doing. He replied, "It's me. I am killing people. I am going to kill you." But when he pointed the gun at her, he continued, "Oh, you are old. I won't kill you," and just walked away. William Reynolds was shot in the back. Husband and wife Peter and Jean Bergen were the next victims when Sartin shot them in their car. Kathleen Miley, who was 64 years old, was then shot after she left the church. Ernest Carter was shot next. Roy Brown was injured when Sartin fired through the windscreen of his car, and 69-year-old Jean Miller was in her garden on Brantwood Avenue when Sartin shot her. After firing his final shot, Sartin got into his car and drove to Whitley Bay. Unarmed police officer Danny Herdman was in an unmarked police car and had heard a radio call about the shootings. He saw Sartin's car and followed it, travelling at around 60 miles per hour. Sartin parked at the car park and emerged from the car without his gun. Herdman then arrested him. The frenzied attack lasted 15 minutes. It later emerged that he was suffering from acute schizophrenia. In 1990, he was charged with taking the life of Kenneth McIntosh and also charged with 16 counts of attempted murder, but because of his mental state, the case did not go to court until 1996. He pleaded not guilty to all charges, but he was deemed to be suffering from a schizophrenic illness so severe that he has never been fit enough to face trial. He was sent to Ashworth Hospital. Next is Mark Corner. In 2003, Mark Corner took the lives of two vulnerable young women in his flat in Everton. The two victims were Pauline Stephen and Hanan Parry. 25-year-old Pauline Stephen left her home around 11 p.m. to work the streets of Everton. She was a lady of the night. She had actually been a lady of the night for just a year. Just 6 days after Pauline was reported missing, her mother gave a press conference where she said she feared her daughter was dead. Pauline was 25 years old and a mother herself. 9 days after she went missing, police teams searched around the area. Her car was found abandoned, and they found clothes that Pauline had last been seen wearing. Just yards away, she was found in a bin bag. Post-mortem examinations confirmed that there were two victims, the second victim being 19-year-old Hanan Parry. Police opened a huge investigation and continued searching. During this investigation, a man called Ian Corner walked into Crosby Police Station and told officers his brother Mark Corner was responsible for the two murders. Detectives raided Mark Corner's flat and found traces of blood in the bathroom and tools used in the crime. Mark Corner was arrested in connection with the discovery of the two women in the alleyway. More evidence was found in Stanley Park and in his freezer unit. He hired them and then took their lives. He began plotting crimes shortly after leaving his mother and father's house and moving into his own flat. He had intercourse with Hanan Parry and then took her life. The next morning he began planning his next crime. He bought tools and saws from a DIY shop. He approached Pauline Stephen in the red light area close to his flat. He had intercourse and then took Pauline's life. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter of taking the lives of Pauline and Hanan on the grounds of diminished responsibility at Liverpool Crown Court in October 2003. He denied murder. On the 10th of December, he was detained indefinitely at Ashworth Hospital under the Mental Health Act. The court heard that Corner, who believed he was on a divine mission to take the lives of ladies of the night. He suffered hallucinations and was delusional. He had violent and sadistic thoughts. It was claimed that Corner was embarking on a modern-day Jack the Ripper spree when he was caught. Next is Valdo Calocane. Calocane took the lives of Grace O'Malley Coomer and Barnaby Webber, who were both 19 years old and university students, as well as Ian Coates, who was 65 years old and a school caretaker. It was a rampage through Nottingham in the early hours of the 13th of June 2023. He then stole Ian Coates' van and drove into 3 pedestrians who were seriously injured. Calocane was referred to mental health services when he was arrested in May 2020 for breaking down the door of a neighbour's flat. He was assessed and sent home, but arrested again just an hour later after breaking into another flat, where the woman was injured by jumping out of the first floor window to escape. Over the course of the next few years, he was hospitalised on 4 different occasions, each time displaying threatening and assaultive behaviour as a result of psychosis. His CQC report says that he frequently provided misleading information and showed little understanding or acceptance of his condition, and evidence showed he was not taking his medication at his home. The report says that his family repeatedly contacted the trust to share concerns about his deteriorating mental state, but this was not always acted upon. In July 2020, a psychiatrist noted, "There seems to be no insight or remorse, and the danger is that this will happen again, and perhaps Valdo will end up taking someone's life." He was discharged from mental health services to his GP in September 2022 due to a lack of engagement 9 months before the crime, and on the same day an arrest warrant was issued over his assault of a police officer while being sectioned. In January 2024, he was given an indefinite hospital order after pleading guilty to 3 counts of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility due to a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia, which experts concluded had caused him to carry out the killings. The families of the victims were further traumatized when they learned that police did not detain him after he attacked a police officer a year before. They found out that prosecutors dropped murder charges and he instead admitted manslaughter and received a hospital order because of his mental condition. Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood said there had been cause to review how diminished responsibility should be reflected in the classification of homicide offences, after he was handed an indefinite hospital order for the attacks instead of a jail sentence. This is currently now being reviewed and has been pushed by the victims' families. Next is Barry Williams, who was an unmarried foundry worker. He lived at 14 Andrew Road in the West Midlands with his elderly parents. His parents owned and ran a metal polishing business in Birmingham. He liked firearms and he held a valid certificate, which allowed him to possess a single semi-automatic weapon. He used this weapon at approved gun clubs for sports shooting at targets, but he had erratic behaviour. He would shoot dummies dressed in wigs and modified his bullets to make them more powerful. This actually led him being expelled from one club in Telford. His nickname there was the Cowboy. Members of another gun club where Williams was a member had expressed concerns that he was stealing bullets. In the 1970s, he had many disputes with his neighbours, especially the Burkett family who lived next door. It was the noise of their television that annoyed him, and their record player. He said that it disturbed him and his parents, but this didn't stop and became an obsession. He thought his neighbours were mocking him. On one occasion, during a row about noise, he told Philip Burkett, "I'm going to exterminate you." On the evening of the 26th of October 1978, around a week after his threat, George Burkett and his 20-year-old son Philip were working on Philip's car in the front of their house. At around 7 p.m, annoyed by the noise they were making, William shot them both with a pistol. George passed away where he fell, and Philip ran into the house. Williams followed him, shooting him again and taking his life. He then took the life of George's wife, Iris. The Burkett's 17-year-old daughter was hit 4 times, but luckily survived. 2 other neighbours, a married couple who had witnessed the attack on the Burketts, also survived. The injured were treated at Birmingham General Hospital. After discharging around 23 rounds, Williams fled the scene by car, firing a further 6 shots from a second pistol. In Stanhurst Way, he shot at 2 boys aged 10 and 11 who were playing football, and at a woman, but missed them all. He passed through Wednesbury. He shot through the windows of a barber shop and 2 houses. In one of these, a 9-year-old girl was hurt by glass. He stopped for petrol and drove off without paying. Williams then took the lives of another married couple, Michael and Lisa Demir, after stopping to use the petrol filling station which they ran. Lisa passed away immediately and Michael died later in hospital. Williams slept rough in some woodland and was arrested the next morning in Spring Gardens, Buxton, after a 30-mile car chase at high speed. After his car was involved in a collision, he pulled a gun and attempted to hijack one of the police cars which had been following him. He was overpowered without firing his gun by the unarmed officers who had been pursuing him. He later said he wanted the police to shoot him. The police found ammunition, weapons and several homemade bombs. He was charged with 5 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. In March 1979, he pleaded not guilty to murder, but instead pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. This plea was accepted by prosecution. Psychiatrists gave evidence that he had an active paranoid psychosis. He was given an indefinite sentence at Broadmoor Hospital and at Ashworth Hospital. His parents described him as a quiet boy and said they had no idea of what he was preparing to do. Williams, who was diagnosed with schizophrenia, was released in 1994 once doctors and a mental health tribunal decided that he was no longer a risk to the public. Once released, he changed his name to Harry Street. A statement by the Mental Health NHS Foundation Trust said, Harry Street was released on a conditional discharge, subject to specific conditions, in 1993 by a mental health tribunal, an independent body, after careful consideration of the medical evidence presented to them. On release, he was actually allowed to live in a bail hostel only 5 to 6 miles away from Andrew Road, where he committed his crimes. This resulted in various complaints, and he moved to Wales. He married in 1996 and had a child the same year. The family moved to Hazelville Road, Hall Green in Birmingham in 2005. In October 2013, allegations were heard that he had waged a campaign of harassment against his next-door neighbour. Williams' home was searched by West Midlands Police as part of their investigation, and he was found to be in possession of an improvised bomb, 50 homemade bullets, a revolver and 2 pistols. At Birmingham Crown Court in October 2014, he pleaded guilty to 3 charges of possessing a prohibited firearm, to putting a neighbour in fear of violence, and to making an improvised explosive device. He was again ordered to be detained. He passed away on the 24th of December 2014 from a suspected heart attack. The next 3 patients are 3 that I have covered before in other videos, so I will do a quick run through, but they are needed to be mentioned. Ian Brady. He committed crimes with his girlfriend Myra Hindley in and around Manchester between July 1963 and October 1965. The 5 children were Pauline Reed, John Kilbride, Keith Bennett, Leslie Ann Downey and Edward Evans. They were all aged between 10 and 17. At least 4 were SA'd. The bodies of 2 of the victims were discovered in 1965 in Saddleworth Moor. Another was discovered there in 1987, more than 20 years after Brady and Hindley's trial. Keith Bennett's body is also thought to be buried there, but despite many searches, it remains undiscovered. They were both charged for taking the lives of 3 of the children and received life sentences under a whole life tariff. The investigation was reopened in 1985 after Brady was reported as having confessed to taking the lives of the 2 other children. Hindley stopped claiming her innocence in 1987 and confessed to all the murders. After confessing to these additional murders, Brady and Hindley were taken separately to Saddleworth Moor to assist in the search for the graves. Hindley made several appeals against her life sentence, claiming she was a reformed woman and no longer a danger to society, but she was never released and died in 2002 at the age of 60 after serving 36 years in prison. Ian Brady was diagnosed as a psychopath in 1985 and confined in the high-security Ashworth Hospital. In 2015, a security guard who worked at Ashworth Hospital was jailed for 20 months after he smuggled a camera into the hospital and tried to take photographs of Brady. Nurses who worked with Brady said he was an exceptionally difficult patient and refused to be treated. One nurse said that he only wanted a ready supply of paper and pens and had no interest of being rehabilitated. He constantly asked to be allowed to die and wished to never be released. He died in 2017 in Ashworth Hospital at the age of 79. He served 51 years. Next we look at Charles Arthur Salvador, also known as Charles Bronson. He is a British criminal and had a violent and notorious life as a prisoner. He has spent periods detained in Rampton Hospital, Broadmoor Hospital and Ashworth High Security Psychiatric Hospital. He was first arrested as a petty criminal and was convicted and sentenced in 1974 to 7 years imprisonment for armed robbery. Further sentences were imposed because of attacks on prisoners and guards. He was released in 1987 and he began a bare-knuckle boxing career in the East End of London. His promoter thought he needed a more suitable name and suggested he changed it to Charles Bronson. He was returned to prison in 1988 on the conviction concerning another robbery. He's a very violent prisoner and has taken numerous hostages in the course of confrontations with guards, resulting in sentences of life imprisonment. He has been held at times in each of England's 3 hospitals like previously mentioned, but also has been held in many prisons. Bronson has been featured in books and interviews and studies of prison reform and treatment. He said, "I'm a nice guy, but sometimes I lose all my senses and become nasty. That doesn't make me evil, just confused." He has spent years in segregation from other prisoners. He has wrote books about exercising in confined spaces, and he is an artist who does paintings and illustrations of prison and psychiatric hospital life. They have actually been exhibited and he won awards for them. In 2014, he changed his name to Charles Salvador in honour of one of his favourite artists. The Charles Salvador Art Foundation was founded to promote his artwork and help those in positions even less fortunate than his own to participate in art. He has appealed plenty of times, stating that he has never taken someone's life but has been given a life sentence. In 2023, his application for parole was rejected. Our final case is that of Dale Cregan, who was born on the 6th of June 1983. He is one of 3 siblings. His father left the family home and married a former policewoman with the Greater Manchester Police. At school, he began dealing cannabis and developed a bad fetish for knives. He spent 18 months living with his sister in Tenerife, and when he returned, he began collecting firearms and he possessed around 10 weapons, including machine guns. He became a dealer and claimed that he was earning around £20,000 a week in profit, but always gave his job as a plasterer. He's known as One Eye due to his missing eye. It's believed to have been taken out under circumstances unknown. He has always told friends it was a result of a brawl in Thailand. On the 25th of May 2012, Mark Short, who was 23 years old, was shot in the Cotton Tree pub, and his father, David Short, who was 46, was also shot in a gun and grenade attack at his home on the 10th of August 2012. Cregan was on bail after being arrested in June 2012 for the questioning over the murder of Mark Short. Greater Manchester police officers Fiona Bone, who was 32, and Nicola Hughes, who was 23, were on a routine patrol on the 18th of September 2012 when they were sent to Abbey Gardens in Greater Manchester at about 11 a.m. following a report of a burglary. This was a result of a 999 emergency telephone call from a member of the public. It was later found out that this telephone call was made by Dale Cregan, who had led the officers into a trap. After arriving at the house where the crime had been reported, the officers came under attack, with 32 gunshots being fired at them in 31 seconds and 1 hand grenade being used. Fiona Bone passed away at the scene, and Nicola Hughes was badly wounded and later passed away in hospital. Cregan then walked into a police station saying he had done 2 coppers because police were hounding his family. Cregan stated that his only regret was that he killed 2 female police officers. On the 21st of September 2012, Cregan appeared in Manchester Crown Court via a video link from Strangeways Prison. On the 24th of September, he was further remanded. Cregan pleaded not guilty to the murders of police officers Nicola Hughes and Fiona Bone, as well as the murders of Mark Short and David Short. He changed his plea to guilty for the murders of the two police officers on the 12th of February 2013 and pleaded guilty on the 22nd of May 2013 to the murders of father and son David and Mark Short. The murders of David and Mark Short were actually gang related, and it was a decade-long feud between two criminal families in Manchester, the Shorts and the Atkinsons, with whom Cregan was friendly with. He was sentenced to life imprisonment for the 4 murders with a whole life order. In August 2013, it was reported that Cregan was on a hunger strike at Sartin prison. He was moved to Ashworth Hospital in September 2013. He was transferred back to Manchester in March 2018 from Ashworth, where it was reported he had boasted about his workout regime and access to snooker and tennis. He remains in Manchester prison, also known as Strangeways. And that concludes our video today. And it also concludes our coverage of the 3 psychiatric high security hospitals in the UK. I was thinking of doing a very long video, probably close on the hour and a half, 2 hour mark, of all the patients from Ashworth Hospital, Broadmoor Hospital, as well as Rampton Secure Hospital. But obviously, it'll be going over cases that I have already covered, a few new ones in there, but let me know in the comment section if this is something you would be interested in. But as always, thanks so much for watching, and until next time.